The southern African nation of Zimbabwe went to the polls this week, and the results being announced yesterday. Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa has been re-elected to serve a second term. We continue to reflect on the elections. We're now joined by excluded presidential candidate Saviour Kasukuwere. He fought tooth and nail after being expelled from the presidential race due to being out of the country for more than 18 months continuously. Thank you very much, sir, for your time this morning. Perhaps let's start by taking a look at Zimbabwe's Electoral Commission Chair, Priscilla Chigumba, when she announced the results. Let's take a look, listen at this.
The total votes cast were 4,561,221. Total valid votes cast were 4,468,668. Total votes rejected, 92,553. Our total voter population was 6,623,511. The voter turnout was 68.9%. Now, therefore, I, Priscilla Chigumba, the chairperson of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, in terms of Section 110, subsection 3, do hereby declare that Mnangagwa Emmerson Mnangagwa of ZANU-PF Party has received 2,350,711 votes out of 4,468,730 valid votes cast, which are more than half the number of valid votes cast in the presidential election. Therefore, Mnangagwa Emmerson Mnangagwa of ZANU-PF Party is declared duly elected President of the Republic of Zimbabwe with effect from 26 August 2023.
And there you have it. Let's speak to Saviour Kasukuwere on the election results. Thank you very much, sir, once again for your time. Given that the ZANU-PF was looking at some 5 million votes, and that's not even the number of people who cast their ballots, are you surprised at the outcomes?
Well, I'm not. Obviously, they were over-ambitious. I think it was basically a pitch trying to sell a bigger number, when in actual fact that their numbers will not get that far. And perhaps this is a reflection of how the people decided to respond. If the numbers were judging that they were going to get over 6 million people, then therefore means that it could have been a very negative message coming from the people then.
Let's stay on that aspect of a negative message, because in 2021 the population of Zimbabwe was some 15.99 million people. The voter population was 6 million people. People who actually turned out to vote were less than 5 million, the 5 million that ZANU-PF thought it would gain in the election. What does that really tell us?
Well, I think I'd rather look at this more importantly from the observer's report, which basically puts the electoral list on the table and say what is it that must be done, because that has a very direct relationship, correlation with how people turn up for the elections. There is always a play of saying we have 7 million people. Is that voters' roll really accurate? Are these numbers that are churned out, for instance, very accurate, or they're just, a process that might actually not be correctly handled in the first place? And then when you then get the people to vote, or they come out, those numbers don't tally. So this is, I think, what we're seeing here, from 5 million now to 6 million. How authentic was the voters' roll? And this is one of the major issues that is raised in the observer's report. Who can authenticate that these were the actual numbers of the people who were registered?
You speak of the Observer Mission report, and for the first time in Zimbabwe's election history, they have not declared this a free and fair election.
Well, and I think this is a very major development. It's a milestone, really. It allows for Zimbabweans and the world, and especially SADC, which is affected by the crisis in Zimbabwe, to start having a very serious conversation and dialogue. I think we can't run away from the findings of the SADC, as well as the African Union, Commonwealth, and various other people who gave us a sick note to say, listen, you've got to attend to a lot of things. This election does not meet the regional, international thresholds. So this is where our departure point should be. Is this election credible? I think the big answer is no, it's not credible. So whoever participated, tough luck. This actually means we've got to go back to the drawing board, redefine what we want, work out together, and be able to come up with an election in the future which everybody will accept. Because we can't continue for the next 5 years. You're going to be led by an illegitimate regime, a legitimate government, which is born out of a defective electoral process. This is what the message says, and this is where we start from. Now, Zimbabwe needs to re-engage. How do you re-engage when those partners you want to re-engage have cast doubt on your polling processes? And I think this requires leadership for us to sit back and say, guys, what do we do to get our country out of it? More significantly is the regional verdict. This is not easy for SADC to write such a report on a neighbor like Zimbabwe. I have a feeling that apart from their observations, which this time were very intimate, they said they saw what was happening, but they also having to live with the day-to-day pain of shouldering Zimbabwe's burdens. This is a beginning where they're saying, let's have a start. Let's clean up the political mess in Zimbabwe and allow Zimbabweans to choose the leadership that they want. If anybody does not see through what SADC has written, then they're not being serious politicians. And let alone, they're not being honest to themselves. I think for the first time, I take my hats off to the SADC team. They were able to put up the laundry list for us. And it is now up to us as Zimbabweans. And at the next Troika meeting, next SADC meeting, these matters must be ventilated. Is this conduct acceptable?
You speak of allowing Zimbabweans to choose a government that they want. What has disallowed Zimbabweans over the years from choosing a leadership that they want? At one particular moment, you were part of the system. What do we know about the DNA of the ruling party that disallows for this engagement to happen?
Well, it's not the DNA. In the past, certainly, there were some incidences, but largely the elections were conducted in a free and fair manner. They were conducted, and there were instances where the winners and the losers would accept that this is actually what has happened, this is the truth. But in this case, there was naked aggression, pushing people to vote for a given candidate. This far as business is a disgrace. You've got the Friends of Forever for Zimbabwe. What does that mean? People being paid to sit in the bush, holding pens, writing, giving people numbers, because they're eating into the poverty of our people. The more poor people are, the more they become susceptible to pressure. So our people generally had to vote with their stomachs in fear. And this is what happened in areas like Machara Central. It's not like they have a devotion to Emmerson Mnangagwa, no. But you could see the systematic violation of their rights. And this is what is contained in the SADC report. So we can talk about the past, but let's focus on the present. What is it that is contained in this report, and how do you cure the problems? And secondly, this is where the coup gets us into this trouble. So you are dealing with a military a climate where force and fear reigns. This is the Zimbabwe we're talking about today. There's fear. So even the judges can't make decisions because they don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. But they're not happy. I know for a fact. I know I was barred from standing. That's obviously, yes. But I know that the report by SADC and the observers is a very critical point in terms of dealing with the oppression that is now embedded in the political system of Zimbabwe. We need to free our people.
Mr. Kasukuwere, I guess I'm asking about the past because it is often said that the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. And is it accurate to say that previously there was no contention, or rather that even though the SADC observer missions had always endorsed, or the AU observer missions had always endorsed the election in Zimbabwe, in 2018 in particular, I remember the EU did not. It was SADC and the AU that actually declared the elections free and fair. there. In 2018, I was based in Bulawayo, and even then there was an embedded environment of fear where you wanted to speak to people and they would not even speak on camera because they were so afraid. I think there's a security force where they would even be watching to see whose home are they going to go to at night so that they can pull those people out for daring to even speak out. And that culture still persists today. So if we fail to learn from what happened yesterday, how do we fix tomorrow?
Well, that's what I'm saying, is that our past defines our future. It is a fact that things did not go right in many instances in the past. However, there were instances, obviously, where politics, in a large measure, dictate also the reading of our observers of what's happening. There was a process, a land reform process. There was politics behind it. There were the farmers who were also funding the opposition. There were reasons then. But today, the distinction is that even if there are no exogenous issues, you just have a situation where elections, people are being forced. There is a coup that happened in 2017. Mm-hmm. That is the beginning of our problems. In the past, fine, there was no military coup. There was a government that was elected by the people. But the changeover from 2017 has brought a new situation in our country. And now you are holding an election with a coup maker who says, do you want me to lose this election? What does it mean? My coup is just still fresh. Do you think you can get the result?
Okay, you spoke of naked aggression a little bit earlier on. I'd like for us to revisit this moment when the CCC yesterday, the Citizens Coalition for Change, was hosting a media briefing and it was disrupted by men who are still unidentified. Let's take a look, listen at that moment.
Overseeing and directing.
We have constitutional rights that we have to be able to do whatever we are doing. We are not doing anything illegal. This is embarrassing here, a huge embarrassment to our country.
And this moment happening in the full glare of cameras, there was a moment in time when Morgan Tsvangirai came out and he was beaten and he was bruised. There was no evidence that we could see, at least, of what exactly happened. But he alleged at the time that he was beaten by government forces. And here you have the CCC yesterday also alleging that these were members of ZANU-PF. And so when you take a look at the situation where live on camera, where there's media from all over the world and this naked aggression is taking place, while we still have not been able to verify as a channel who those men are and who they speak for or who they represent, what does that moment tell you?
Well, when we say this election is faulty, that's exactly what we're talking about. With this kind of behavior, what do you expect the people to do? I mean, who do you expect to stand up in Zimbabwe and challenge such strong arm tactics? Imagine if this was in South Africa, it wouldn't happen. If this was in other countries, it wouldn't happen. Somebody would have come out to criticize or the government to put straight. But what did they do yesterday? The Commissioner of Police, through his spokesperson, said, no, we actually have a warrant of arrest for that fellow. Okay, so since 2020, this very important warrant of arrest was hibernating somewhere. It only had to be exercised or used when it was at the press conference. This is the problem in our country. I say so having been a member of this party for a long time, and I know that the party, to a large extent, does not represent this kind of madness. There are individuals who have now acquired power, the direct force, brute force, who are doing these things. And if we keep quiet on it, we are actually sleepwalking into our death. This is the naked aggression I've been talking about. This is what the majority of our people have to contend with. Now, imagine if you're a villager and you're being told to go and vote, and you've just seen these kind of sites on the television. How do you vote?
You mentioned a little bit earlier on that SADC is affected by the situation in Zimbabwe. How so?
Well, we have been seeing the reports. I'm sure you're not a new person in this region, how much the Zimbabwean exodus has affected the entire region. And in a manner of political speaking, the report by SADC observers is a curative process. They are also trying in a manner, because they live with the Zimbabwean issues. So you can understand that their report is also brought out from an innate position, understanding. Now, the region is affected by the exodus of Zimbabweans who are coming to their countries, be it in Zambia, be it in Zimbabwe, Malawi. We're all over the shore. I am here, among other comrades who are former ministers. Why would I be here if my country was better? I served my country with distinction. I was happy to have been given an opportunity. But just myself as an example, who can't even stand for presidency? Because after having shot your home, they don't investigate, then they exile you, then they say to you, you have been outside the country for 18 months. If you are back in the country, when you want to land, they want to arrest you. How is SADC expected to look at this situation? So when SADC comes up with a report, that is, I think, for the first time, prescriptive. We must take it on board. And I want to believe the SADC leaders will have the capacity to see through that report. It will be a shame if they ignored this report. They should sit us down as Zimbabweans and say, guys, let's fix this matter. Zimbabwe must be fixed by us, but we need SADC, because SADC is now bearing the brand of our chaos. That kind of chaos. Who will stay in Zimbabwe after such chaos? Kids are holding on to their passports, degreed. They have to leave immediately thereafter. They think elections can bring us hope. You can make a decision. They'll buy you. They'll harass you. They'll arrest the journalists. They'll do everything. No, that's unacceptable.
You speak of SADC bearing the brunt. It could be very well argued that that has been happening for a number of years, but there hasn't been, from the outside looking in anyway, it does not appear that there's actual will to do anything on Zimbabwe. You need only take a look at South Africa's position on Zimbabwe. I'm not sure if it's clear to you what it is. Previously, it was quiet diplomacy. And so you take a look at the other leaders from SADC, and you ask the question, is there will to actually get not just people around the table to talk, but you take a look at maybe ECOWAS in West Africa, where there's proper sanctions that will be applied, and not sanctions just economic, right? But when you speak
political sanctions.
Absolutely, absolutely. So do we not need, as SADC, as a body, to have more teeth and not just talk?
I think that's why I salute the Nevers Mumba team. I think for the first time, SADC has been able to look into the laundry material that we have. That's what I'm saying. They have been able to pull out and say, we need to wash these clothes. What it means that this report, therefore, will be placed by the chairperson of the Troika before a summit of the heads of state. So, Dr. Nevers Mumba and his team, it's not personal, by the way. All the countries, Angola, Mozambique, all the other countries were involved in the compilation of this observer report. And the chairperson of the team, of the observer mission, will head over to the chairperson of Troika. Troika will take it now to the SADC summit. The discussion must therefore begin. Because we have been told SADC does not recognize these elections. The observer mission says they're null and void. So we're basically playing a game of a country disqualified out of FIFA. You can play your soccer, but FIFA rules have simply said we don't recognize your scores. It's essential, therefore, that we use the SADC avenue, the courage that these commissioners had for us to deal with the issues. Because unless and until we address the genesis or the problems that have been highlighted, Zimbabwe will come right.
You mentioned the 2017 coup more than once, and so, and you also mentioned the military aspect of it. Does that mean, or does that suggest, rather, that Zimbabwe is run by the military and not the head of state?
The AU position has always been clear. Coups are not acceptable. SADC blinked once, and I don't think they want to blink again. They blinked and allowed the coup to subsist. Okay? This is a fact. Mugabe was not removed democratically. My house was shot at. I survived an attack, assassination attempt. not by security guards, but by armed members of the Defense Force of Zimbabwe. Now, if you have a defense force which operates inside the country, it's against the Constitution. The deployment of the army is not done by a commander outside the commander-in-chief. Mugabe had not authorized it. Now, SADC simply, because they thought removing Mugabe would be resolving the question. Now, for the first time, there is a paper that has been produced by the SADC Observer Committee, which has seen what the people are going through, and is direct relationship, correlationship to the coup. The 2017 is what brought Mnangagwa in. And now, being Mnangagwa, once you have Mnangagwa, the crocodile in there, he will not leave, he will not remove. You can't remove him without really sitting down and saying, what do we do with this character? He brought himself through the armed force, and today we now see the naked aggression, the naked pursuit for power, wealth, and so forth, that we're having to deal with. And I'm saying, that's why I'm taking my hat off to SADC. And saying, SADC, the beginning is to look at how these guys came into power.
Why is Emmerson Mnangagwa known as the crocodile?
I wish I knew. I don't know. Like
Surely you have some intimate
his face looks like a crocodile, I think. I mean, you don't like to be called a crocodile. A serious human being, you can't allow yourself to be called a crocodile. I mean, like if I call you a rhinoceros, I mean, would you accept that?
Perhaps it speaks to my character and not the physical trait.
When people give you a nickname, which is in keeping with your character, you sly, you take people for granted when they don't expect you, you just come out of the water, pop out, and they drag the men in. It's a man-eater. Crocodiles are not known for being harmonious. They're not pets. You can't even try and tame a crocodile. If you do, it will still deal with you effectively. This is what Emmerson Mnangagwa is now doing, dealing with the whole region nicely now.
Mr. Kasukuwere, I was speaking to a friend in Zimbabwe and they asked a very uncomfortable question, especially when we speak about the old guard or people who were part of the system at some point, yourself included. And they pointed out that this has been happening over a number of years, Zimbabwe's decline, and the people who were in the system at the time were also complicit to this. So when today in 2023 you sit and you speak against not just the system, but you want a better Zimbabwe, what was tying your hands from creating a better Zimbabwe from back then?
Do your friends want us to go into a history lecture, or they want us to deal with the reality of resolving the Zimbabwean question?
Perhaps a little bit of both.
Well, I'm not a political scientist who goes into history. I'm one who sees into the future. Admitted, there were many things that went wrong in our past. But it's important now at this hour to simply also look back and say, guys, we messed up. How do we fix the situation? And I say so because I have an inside knowledge. Having been in there for that long, I acknowledge we made many mistakes, and for which we have to apologize to the people of Zimbabwe. We can't run away from that responsibility. It can only come as a result of our showing contrition and accepting a lot of things went wrong. However, how do we move forward? Do we therefore say, because it has been happening in the past, let it continue to happen into the future? The people's savings are being lost on a daily basis. Corruption is running through the roof. Elections are held in a naked manner where there is blatant aggression. The votes, you hide the voters' roll until the last day. You are hiding the voters' roll. Why? There is no transparency. Where did you buy the paper? Nobody knows. These issues, whilst we can talk about the past, I think there is actually an escalation of what wrong was done in the past. Now we are actually seeing an additional, if anything, a quadrupling of those mistakes. And I don't think that's the way we're going to resolve this Zimbabwean question, because we've now become a cancer to the region. So when some of us speak, we say so from a good space. I don't think it's about power, no, but it's about resolving this concern that the people have. Having been in your country now for some years, I've seen the pain in the eyes of our people on a daily basis. They sit with you and say, I just want to go back home. Let me tell you, many of the Zimbabweans want to go back home. All they want is to have the freedom to do what they want. They can't have a country where corruption is going north and poverty is going south. They work, their savings are gone. We need a stable Zimbabwe. South Africa is stable. How many South Africans do you find in Mozambique? Do you find in Zimbabwe? Do you find in Angola? There is nothing. Now, if we can't deal with that question, even having been part of the history, we should therefore be able to be objective enough to say, but let's fix this situation. We've had political leaders here. Malema supports that let Zimbabweans, let our people work together. Yes, welcome. Gator and Mackenzie will say, all foreigners out. Imagine the anguish a small family in Berea has to live with when they are told foreigners must leave or we're going to ban them. The fear. We want to be a responsible member of the region. We should look after our people. Leadership is about looking after your people. Leadership is not about putting your sand like in the head like an ostrich and ignoring the people, telling them to face our people. Our degreed people have nothing to do. They're not working. Zimbabwe must be having investments coming. Zimbabwe's economy must be there also to assist and support the majority of our people. Our economy today, there is grand looting. Other foreigners just come, start mining whatever they want. They take whatever they want. Our people are left, if they raise a voice, knocked immediately down. That can't be.
Fair enough. You speak of Julius Malema. He had promised some 500 buses for people who'd like to go back home to go vote.
No, just because I've raised Julius Malema.
No, I'm curious.
I
am curious.
You must ask Julius.
Here's the question. That was a little bit of context, but here's the question. Are you aware of any people from Zimbabwe who are based in South Africa or anywhere else in the region that went back home to vote?
I think there's been a number of Zimbabweans who went back home, but I can see a number of them were dispirited when the election process started choosing the opponents. You know, Mnangagwa was now carefully choosing who he wants in the elections decided by the people, not by the judges and Emmerson Mnangagwa, who then chooses who he wants. I can imagine some of the people who were going to come in and support us felt that this election is a non-entity. I mean, it's a nullity. Why should we waste our time even going there when already Emmerson has decided who he wants?
I guess maybe in closing up the conversation, we are expecting at this hour or the next Emmerson Mnangagwa, who has been re-elected for a second term, to give an address. Your message for Zimbabweans in the diaspora?
We have to hold on. We have to continue to talk about this issue. Let's support SADC, its observations. And I hope Emmerson Mnangagwa will acknowledge that the neighbors have spoken. And what they've said is very important to take into account. We can't ignore, we can't rubbish, we can't insult them. Let's have a decent conversation with our neighbors. Let's listen to what they've said. Why did they come up with such a report? Is this observation correct? And if it is so, how do we resolve it? How do we put right that which is wrong, so that at least we can have the confidence of our neighbors going into the future? We don't need those from far away. We just need our neighbors who have supported us through and through to carry us through, and it's essential that we listen to them.
I'm curious, is the wisdom of the late great president of Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe, missed?
He was a great man. He was a great man. Mugabe did the best that he could. He was human, of course. He had his own faults, but Mugabe had a human heart.
Thank you very much for your time this morning. Saviour Kasukuwere speaking to us on the back of the results being announced in Zimbabwe, where Emmerson Mnangagwa has been re-elected as president of the Southern African nation.